how to optimize. And then coming soon in January 2025, we're going to have a Zoom accessibility course, and that'll be fully online as well. For our services, we do website evaluations where we have our evaluators look at a sample of web pages and then write up a report documenting the accessibility issues that they find. We do have our Wave tools suite, and some people use Wave in their own software. We also have a community version of Wave where that tool can be used for free. There's a browser plugin, and we also do strategic consulting. So if you're in the process of creating new policies or procedures, or a Title II stuff that might be coming up, we have services related to that as well. Now, I do want to take just a second here, and if I can escape out of this, I want to show you our website. All right, let's see. Okay, hopefully you're seeing the website now. The reason why I just wanted to go here is, we are a nonprofit organization. So we do have services that we use for cost recovery and to pay our salaries, but we have a ton of stuff that's available at no charge. So in terms of our articles here, there's lots of different subjects. This is all kind of web stuff, HTML and ARIA. Uh, some things that might be more of interest to you folks are the document and media accessibility. So like if you go into the Microsoft Word, we just really go through things at a high level. And then for the different versions, like this is 2019 for Mac, we just really spell it out for you how to create and edit headings. We have screenshots and everything. So I'd encourage you to use those articles as a resource. The other thing that we have that may be of interest to you if you're starting to do some web accessibility is we have a tool that's called Wave. And there's some browser extensions where you can use Wave built right into your browser. But you can also just come to this page and type in an address. So I'll type in usu.edu and we'll see how our site's doing here. So basically it's going to look at this page and then it's going to find things that are WCAG failures or and other issues. So it'll point out, like if there's low contrast. Now, sometimes some of these low contrast errors are going to be where there's text on a background and it's hard to determine that. But so that might be a tool if, like I said, if you're starting to look at some of your web pages and you want to get an idea. Every time you click on something, you can look at the code to see what's really happening down there. You can look at a reference. So, what does it mean? Why does it matter? What to do? And then if there's some WCAG standards that are associated with it, there's links down there. So we also have a newsletter that you can sign up for if you'd like. And one of the, I think, really hidden jewels of our website is this email list that we have. So we have like dozens, if not hundreds, of experts that follow along with our email discussion lists. And nobody's getting paid to do this. They just answer these questions. So, we have these archives here, but these are going to be all kinds of questions from something very, very technical to something more high level, but someone can just come and post questions to the community and then get an answer. All right, so let's go back to the PowerPoint here. Let's, Okay. So this slide just says, please note, Zoom is a dynamic platform. This information is based upon our latest review and testing, so things do change in Zoom. So I'll apologize now if there's anything that I've stated that has since changed. The other thing I do want to kind of just let you know at the outset is Zoom is a very accessible tool, and compared to other software, that I've worked with or reviewed, I've been building this Zoom course for about going on about 2 years now. And so I've had a lot of experience and I've seen some of the evolutions, and I'm very impressed. So I certainly wouldn't want anybody to come away from this presentation thinking that I'm suggesting that Zoom is not an accessible tool, because it is. Now there are some gaps that are specific to Zoom. There's also some gaps that are just inherent to different tools. One example of that is whiteboards. Whiteboards can be made accessible up to a point, and we'll talk a little bit about some of those gaps. Okay, so we're going to look at 5 Zoom tools today. We're going to look at reactions, chat, Q&A, polls and quizzes, and whiteboards. And I caught just a little bit of the previous presentation, so I noticed that reactions and chat and Q&A were being used, and so hopefully this will be relevant to some of you. Polls and quizzes are also a great way. These tools are all about interaction, and so importantly, when we are using these tools, we just want to make sure that everybody is being invited to this interaction. And so there are some techniques, there are some things to be watchful for, and that's what we'll be covering today. So I want to look at these tools from 2 perspectives. So one perspective is from what I'll call participants, and that's the people that are, attending a meeting or watching a webinar. So at WebAIM, and we always try to start with um, thinking about the end user in mind, and how some things may impact them. That's why we do what we're doing, is we want to try to make things as accessible to people, regardless of any disability that they may have. And then the other, whoops, sorry, I went the wrong way. The other role is going to be a presenter, somebody like myself that's presenting information, either in a webinar or in a meeting. Now, some of the things that I'm going to talk about with the presenter role, oftentimes these monitoring these tools may be delegated to somebody else, right? So you may have somebody else monitoring chat or the Q&A tool. But for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to talk about it as the responsibility of a presenter. But just so keep that in mind too. It might be somebody other than the talking head person that's doing these things. All right, so let's start with reactions. From a participant point of view, I've got a screenshot of the reactions menu, and depending on what system you're on, may look different. But there's some effects there. There's some reactions, little emojis. There's a be right back if you're gonna step away for a moment. You want to let people know what's going on. I assume most of you are familiar with reactions. Some things to keep in mind is that reactions are not presented directly to a screen reading software user. And we've tested this with JAWS and NVDA and VoiceOver. Those are 3 different versions of screen reading software. And so it's important to keep that in mind, that if there's information that people are providing through the reactions that you feel like is appropriate for the whole group, just be aware that screen reader users are not going to get that information. Now, there is an exception to that. The exception is, oops, let's see, clicking on this screen here. If a screen reader user is a host, then they will be alerted when there's a raised hand. So, if I was using a screen reader, if I had extremely low vision or if I was blind, if somebody raised their hand to ask a question, then I would receive an alert for that. Now, in terms of reactions from a presenter's point of view, I've got a little screenshot of the clapping hands reaction. And it's really going to be up to you or who's ever monitoring reactions to determine if something meets the level of it needs to be shared with the whole group, right? And that might be determined by context. If in terms of if a meeting is formal or less formal. Um, it might also be determined by the number of participants presenting that reaction. Like for the clapping hands, if I saw a lot of people putting that up, which is probably going to happen at the end of this presentation, but I'm just kidding. I would, if I felt like it was appropriate to share something verbally, I would just say something like, I see a number of you are clapping your hands for this idea. Again, that way, for somebody that has low vision and doesn't see those reactions or is blind and it's not being presented to a screen reader, they can receive that same visual information that sighted people are receiving. The next reaction I want to talk about is raise hand, and I got a little screenshot there. And the important thing to remember about raise hand is it does not dismiss automatically. And so most reactions, they when a participant clicks on it, it sends it up. It's attached, by their video if they're sharing video, or if not, just by the thumbnail with their name. And then after 10 seconds, it dismisses automatically. Excuse me, raise hand does not dismiss automatically. And it's not a huge deal, but some participants, especially those with certain cognitive disabilities, this just might be really distracting for them if they see this raised hand, or so that's something to keep in mind. If the person doesn't lower the hand themselves, again, you might have somebody that's a co-host that might be able to lower that hand, or you could do it yourself. What you'd want to do is open the participants panel and then find the participant in the list, which for a sighted user will be pretty easy because you'll just see the little raised hand. And then there's going to be a button that says lower hand, and you'll just click that button, and then it will dismiss that reaction. All right, let's move on to chat. Chat is a great tool. It can be very useful for helping people to feel included. It's a great way for a lot of people to share thoughts that they're having without necessarily, having everybody sharing it verbally, where there could be a lot of clash and conflict. But there are some things that I think it's important to keep in mind from a participant's perspective with chat. So the first thing is, if there's a large volume of chat, and or if some of the messages are off topic, this might be a source of distraction, or it could even overload, like cognitively overload some users, some of the participants. And again, this could be more context dependent, during a presentation, or uh, maybe if you were watching a video that had a lot of information in it. So you'll just want to keep an eye on that. Another thing to be aware of is screen reader users receive an alert for each public chat message. So I don't know if you've ever been in a meeting before where the chat messages are flying fast and furiously. But if you can imagine receiving an audio alert, you know, and having that message read out every single time somebody posts something to the chat, that could get disruptive, distracting, it could, or or just plain annoying. So you might have a screen reader user disable these alerts. Because they have the ability to disable these alerts, it means as a presenter, I need to make sure that I don't assume that everything that's shared through the chat is going to be accessible by everybody or is presented to everybody. So again, I need to make a determination of when there's something that I think is important enough that the whole group needs to pay attention to it, then I'd like to present that verbally. So from the presenter's perspective, when you're going to share a chat message verbally, we recommend that you follow some steps. So the first step would be to state that you are responding to a chat message or question. And this is one of those things where just like when you have questions in a lecture, that somebody might ask, if there's not a remote microphones, you've probably developed that habit of saying, that's a great question. The question was, and then you repeat it out so that everybody can hear it, especially if there's people that are, in virtually through Zoom or through another service. So you're going to state that question, state that you're responding to a chat message or question. Then you'll want to read or summarize the message. It's not always necessary to read the message word for word, especially if maybe it's pretty long and you don't have that much time. Summarizing the message, as long as it's equivalent, getting that idea across, is going to be okay. And then when appropriate, either respond yourself or invite somebody else to respond. Now, if you are experiencing a really high volume of messages or if they're off topic, then you or who's ever monitoring chat might want to share some verbal guidelines with participants, just in terms of what the expectations are, to help keep those. Might even say like, hey, we want to try to keep the chat messages, limit them to things that are kind of on topic right now. We're going to be going over a lot of important information. Or you might just decide to limit chat to hosts and co-hosts. All right, let's move on to the question and answer tool and taking a look at the participants interface. So there's a dialogue and it has there's two tabs. One tab says all questions, and these are going to be all the questions that were answered publicly with a typed in answer. And then there's another tab that says my questions, which I really like because, again, you might have a lot of questions in that one side. And then if somebody wants to just find theirs, they can click on that tab. So in this case, participant asks a question, will we have the regular monthly meeting next week? The presenter says yes. There's timestamps. And then you can see the text field below. That's where people would type in their questions. So one of the things to consider is if you are answering questions verbally, a lot of times that's just easier. They're pretty straightforward. What color is the sky? Answer blue. But if you are providing answers that have more detailed information, or if that information is really critical, things they need to remember to do to register by a certain amount of time, just consider either yourself as a presenter, or if you have somebody else that you're working with, typing in those answers, again, because they'll be displayed and then the participant will have an ongoing opportunity to review them during the meeting. In terms of a screen reading software user and the question and answer tool, they're going to receive notifications when a question is asked, a public answer is typed in, and if a private answer is sent to them. Now, from the perspective of the presenter with the question and answer tool, you have two choices. You can either answer a question live or you can type in an answer. Answering live or verbally, you want to state that you're responding to the question and answer tool and then read or summarize the question. And in terms of like questions and chat, should you say the person's name? Again, that's dependent on context. If it's appropriate to share that name, you could do that. And then you'll respond or invite somebody to respond. Now, in terms of the type answer question, you're going to type your answer into the text field. And then there is an optional something that you can do, which I kind of alluded to in the last slide, which is check send privately to send the answer directly to the participant. So if you check that, it's just going to send it to them. No one else will see it. This is good for if somebody has a question that's a little bit more confidential. But from a accessibility perspective, one of the things it does is try to is to keep your public answer queue a little cleaner, a little bit more focused on questions and answers that apply to everybody. And so other people just don't have to sort through those questions that are just more personal or directed towards one person. All right. So the polls and quizzes tool, I've got a screenshot here of what it looks like. And the title of this is poll is Creating Accessible Polls. And the question is there's multiple choices, and it says in parentheses, single choice. When is the best time to create a poll or quiz? The first choice is before the meeting or webinar. Second choice is during the meeting or webinar. And the third choice is after the meeting or webinar. So a little joke there, a little humor. So from a participant's point of view, in order to optimize the experience for participants with cognitive disabilities, these are our recommendations. First recommendation is use plain language. Now, obviously, in an academic environment, sometimes there are technical terms that need to be used. That's part of the context. And when it talks about using plain language and readability and in the web content accessibility guidelines, it makes considerations for that. There's certain language and terms that you need to learn in order to take classes like chemistry in college, or trigonometry, or whatever it's going to be. The second is to ask succinct questions. So you want to just try to keep your questions straightforward, to the point. This kind of goes back to the poll question. This is why the best time to create a poll or a quiz is before the meeting or webinar, because you can create a question and then maybe come back to it a little bit later and see if you could sharpen it up rather than something just made on the fly. And then the third thing is ensure that there's sufficient time to answer, which I would say for this one, kind of err on the side of caution, err on the side of giving a little bit more time rather than not enough time. Now, for screen reading software users, they are going to be notified when a poll is launched. And this user interface is keyboard accessible. It's very accessible. So they're going to be able to go in there, read the question and read the answer choices and make their selection and submit it. But access to visual results may not be reliably accessible. So if I were just to shoot the results up and not go over them at all, I wouldn't I wouldn't think that's a sufficient method for presenting the results to everybody because somebody with low vision or somebody that's using a keyboard with a screen reader might not be able to access all of that information. Now, from a presenter's point of view, um, you're going to want to provide a summary of the poll when appropriate. So this is when the poll first opens. Not necessarily reading every question or even summarizing every question, but maybe if there's a number of questions, you might want to let them know, there's 5 questions in this poll. You might want to let them know that there are different types of questions, if that's the case, or if it's just one type, let them know what that type is. And then the other thing to let them know is the amount of time that you've kind of planned for people to be able to answer these questions. So that's just kind of set their expectation of hey, it's 3:34 now, and we're gonna review the results at 3:45 or 3:40. Again, whatever is appropriate to the context. You definitely should maintain quiet during the poll. I would recommend turning off your mic and turning off anybody else's mic that might be on. The one exception to this rule might be if you have to play the Jeopardy music because you're having a Jeopardy game, that's certainly allowable. But for the most part, you just want to make sure that there's not any distracting sounds for people. And then you're going to want to ensure that there's enough time to respond. So something that's really helpful with this is while the poll's being conducted and you have the interface, for the person that's giving the poll, you're going to be able to monitor the percentage of participant answers. And so, if you see a question or two that's still at a very low percentage, you might just give people more time. The other thing is right before you're about to close the poll, just ask, does anyone need more time? Raise your hand or, unmute or put something in the chat. Just giving them, that verbal opportunity or, you know, text or reaction opportunity to say, yeah, I just need a little bit more time. All right. So the last tool that we're going to look at is the whiteboards tool. Um, so the whiteboards tool in Zoom is actually very accessible, um, especially compared to some of the whiteboards that I've seen in other similar type software. So Zoom has done a really good job with this. But as I kind of mentioned at the top, there's just some things that are, you know, kind of inherent with whiteboards that are going to create gaps. But keyboard users can add, modify, remove, and even move most objects, which is great. So I have a screenshot here, and it has an example of a whiteboard where there's a green square and a blue triangle and a red circle. And those could have all been potentially created, with a keyboard. You wouldn't need a mouse or a touch screen to drag those shapes out. Now, for screen reading software users, they can read whiteboard text. So if you've got text that you've put in there using the text tool, right, not an image of text or not text that maybe has been drawn with a pen tool, they can read that whiteboard text. They can also access some information about an object, mostly its shape. So they would know, that there's a square and a triangle and a red circle or a circle. One of the things that can be problematic for screen reading software users with a whiteboard is determining the order or the orientation of objects. So in this example, the green square is at the background, right? It's the furthest away object. And then the blue triangle is on top of that. So it's above the square, but below the red circle, and the red circle's in the foreground. Um, so that, in terms of order, it might also be hard for them to determine what the orientation of different objects were. Let's say if you had um, shapes that you were using in a flow chart or a process, it might be hard for them to determine um, that orientation. So it's just something to keep in mind. The pen tool requires a touch screen or a mouse. So for anybody that is a keyboard user, um, which would include screen reading software users or people that use other devices, tracking devices, assistive technology devices, simulate a keyboard. They're not going to be able to use that pen tool. And then also, a pen tool, if you're writing text, then that text is not going to be readable for a screen reading software user. Now, from this perspective of a presenter with the whiteboard, when you're adding visual information, you're going to want to provide an audio description. So this will take some getting used to. Maybe for some of you that use the whiteboard a lot and have taught hybrid classes or online classes, hopefully you've kind of developed this skill as you're putting this information up. You're going to provide, that audio description for things that you're presenting visually, um, which again uh, would be any text that you're putting up, but also shapes and relationships of shapes. And if you have an annotation, pointing to a certain place on a picture or diagram, you're just going to want to kind of talk that through for people that have visual disabilities. So going back to that example before, with the whiteboard, I might say something like the green square is in the background, uh, and then there's a blue triangle that's on top of it, and then on top of that, or in the foreground, is a red circle. And hopefully there would be a little bit more point to those shapes than there is in my very simple example there. And then you would maybe describe what each of those represents, or, whatever the visual information was being relayed. Um, when others are adding information, so, if you're having a collaboration session, right, and other people are writing on the whiteboard and sharing it that way, you either need to ask them to provide audio descriptions when they're needed, or the other thing that you can do is just provide them yourself. So you could just say, now we can see Barbara's, um, she's showing she's using the pen tool to write up the top three things that concern her about armadillos or whatever it is. And then you could just share that information. So this is my contact information, um, accessible Zoom at webaim.org. So if you have any questions that are related to using Zoom or Zoom tools, I'm happy to answer those questions right now. If you think of something later. The other thing is if you are interested in potentially taking part in some beta testing for the Zoom course as we get it ready to launch, you could just shoot me an email and say, hey, put me on the list for beta, and be happy to do that. But yeah, if there are questions, actually, I guess I don't know if maybe the questions tool
Yeah.
is not available, but got
Awesome. Thank you so much, George. That was a great presentation. Are there any questions from attendees in the room? Looking around. Anything online? All right, perfect. Thank you again, George. That was a great presentation, and this was our last presentation of the day. So wanted to say a big thank you to everyone who joined us for the 2024 ASU Accessibility Awareness Day Conference. Recordings for most sessions will be posted within a week or so on the website at aaad.asu.edu. And we encourage you to share what you have learned today with your friends and colleagues. If you would like to learn more, get involved with the accessibility, we have resources for our community members, including the ASU Digital Accessibility Liaisons meeting monthly for ongoing accessibility training that is open to everyone at ASU, or you can join the Universal Design and Accessible Technology Group. Information on both of these groups is on the ASU Accessibility website at accessibility.asu.edu. And if you get a chance, please go to the schedule page or the conference website and use the QR code to find our conference survey. We appreciate any feedback on how to make this event better. Lastly, I know this is a long spiel, we'd like to say a sincere thank you to our volunteers and all of our sponsors. Without them, this conference would not be possible. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. And thank you again, George.
All right. Take care. Bye.